The war in Iran has restarted in right earnest over the last week to 10 days. There have been multiple attacks, both by America and by Iran. America has struck more than 100 targets, particularly in southern Iran. They want to send an unambiguous message that the Strait of Hormuz must be rendered a free and open waterway. Iran, on the other hand, has retaliated not just against commercial tankers that are passing through the strait, but it has also struck on numerous American military bases in the Middle East, including in Jordan, Iraq, Bahrain, etc. This war, which saw a lull, which saw a ceasefire for about a month, a little over a month, has now gone back to the days that we saw back in March. It is now a full-blown conflict yet again. So what gives? How will this finally come to some kind of a conclusion? Or are we to now expect this as the new normal, that there will be these clashes, not just sporadic ones, but intense clashes for days on end, with diplomacy having little chance to succeed? Let's try and make sense of where this war is at right now and how it's likely to play out over the next few days and weeks, because remember, international markets have been spooked. Oil prices have gone up at least by 10% in the last 10 days. I'm now joined by a very special guest. Mr. John Spencer is a retired United States Army officer. He's also currently the chair of urban warfare studies at the Modern War Institute. He's chronicled modern-day wars, including this latest one in Iran. Thank you very much, Mr. Spencer, for speaking with us. So by the end of this month, we would have hit 5 months of this war. Other than that brief interim between April and sometime end of June, early July, now we're back to square one. We're in a situation where Iran first attacked commercial tankers. America then bombarded a series of targets, particularly in southern Iran. In retaliation, Iran is now attacking American assets in the region, including in friendly Gulf Arab countries. What is the status of the war as you see it? Are we now to expect this as the new normal, or do you see this subsiding in the next few days?
Hi, Zakka. Thanks for having me. And just to clarify my title, I'm now the chair of war studies at the Madison Policy Forum. So the United States is now on their 6th night, according to Central Command, of attacks against Iran's basically ability to see in the strait or influence global shipping after Iran attacked UAE tankers to kill at least one crew member on that. I like to point out, while you're absolutely right that Iran is retaliating by hitting what we believe and claims are U.S. bases, but to me, that's irrelevant. I truly believe in borders and sovereignty. Iran is attacking Gulf states, Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, a whole list of them. It's unacceptable to international norms, even in the current conflict. I don't think this will subside anytime soon, to be frank. The MoU is dead. The ceasefire is dead, according to everybody. I think we're back on a battle of wills. The Islamic regime in Iran thought they could get some deal that was not going to be acceptable to the United States. And I don't personally believe, even as objectively as I can, that Iran should have any influence over the Strait of Hormuz or any type of nuclear weapons program. As you know, as much as India knows what happens when a terrorist state gets a nuclear weapon, it is the umbrella for all of their activities in pushing terrorism around the world.
Central to the restarting of this war, this current round over the last week or so, is the Strait of Hormuz and who gets to control the Strait of Hormuz. Iran says, as per the MoU, the wording Iranian arrangement was used. The United States and other countries, including India, have said any international waterway has to be free and open. The question is, who has the will to enforce that free and openness? America clearly, can go back to the blockade, as they've done now in the last couple of days, but that's not rendering this waterway free and open.
Well, so this is always hard when you're doing war analysis in the midst of it to wait and see. If you look at what the United States has been hitting over the last 6 days, especially to do with coastal radars, maritime towers, even cutting off Bandar Abbas from resupply, is they're affecting the means. You're right, the will of the Islamic regime to allow the Strait of Hormuz to be a freedom of navigation situation. will be hard to impact as they believe they still have power and leverage, right? I do believe this ends at a negotiation table, but if the Islamic regime thinks they have immense amounts of leverage to, and as we saw in the memorandum of understanding, which to be clear is just a document of an agreement to have a conversation, and within days, the Islamic regime was already trying to enforce a situation in the Strait of Hormuz that was beyond what the United States believed, even in conceptual to the MoU, was going to be the situation. I do believe the nuclear card is a vital part of the conversation as well. We're focusing on the Strait, and does the United States have the ability to open it by force? I think they're showing that they can set the conditions to do that, and if it needs to escalate, but who is maintaining the escalation ladder? I think, I mean, any objective assessment has to be that the United States has the ability to influence their will in Iran more so than Iran does on other people. It has no ability to affect the United States or Israel, really.
But you know, again, I come back to that fundamental question, not just during the course of these last 6 days when the war is restarted, but during the course of these last almost 5 months, isn't it Iran that has shown that whatever objectives President Trump had when he launched this war, whether it's regime change, whether it's stopping the development of a nuclear weapon, or even on the question of the Strait of Hormuz, it is the Iranians who are calling the shots?
So that's interesting. So the operation went for 38 days, and the Islamic regime in Iran lost its entire political and military leadership. I don't believe the United States was attempting a regime change. It was attempting a regime behavior change. And this is the idea that people use like quagmire or endless wars. This is a large war, right? This is 38 days of Iran's immense amounts of capability that it has. And the idea that that would end quickly and that the Islamic regime was just going to cry uncle immediately, although I don't believe that we'd be even stopping as the United States unless somebody from the Islamic regime, who is the new leadership, had sent a message that they're willing to negotiate those terms that they were willing to negotiate at that point. So this is the contest of wills. So the operation continues to where the Islamic regime fears that its survival or its ability to project power or anything is in jeopardy. And I think that's where you have to get to. This is the combination of not just military power, but the sanctions, the blockade, the diplomatic pressure from its allies is a combination of what the pursuit of the war is about.
So, you know, just in the last 24 hours, and we've seen pictures put out by the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, the U.S. has struck the Chabahar port, or at least a portion of it, is a maritime watchtower, we're given to understand. This was a port that was built, as you know, between India and Iran. India had invested over $100 million in developing this port. And today the Foreign Affairs spokesperson, the Foreign Affairs Ministry spokesperson, indicated that, yes, the watchtower has been hit, but the operations in the port, according to him, have not been hit. Already, we were seeing, you know, a not so very warm relationship between Washington and Delhi because of a myriad issues, whether it's Trump repeatedly claiming that he brokered the ceasefire between Pakistan and India, whether it's the numerous trade and tariff issues, the Russia oil sanctions, and now this war. Officially today, again, the Foreign Ministry spokesperson confirming 14 Indians, seafarers, have died in this war. How do you think this is going to affect the relationship between India and America?
Man, I hope of course, I, as an American, want there to be a huge relationship with India, especially India's rise after Operation Sindoor, and before that, the relationships that it's building with Israel and many other nations, and the advantages of two great democracies having a relationship, I think is important. I hope that Indian population sees the true nature of the Islamic regime and what it's trying to do. If the Islamic regime was able to impose its own rule on the Strait of Hormuz, the ripple effects on both economies, both India and the United States, because our economies rest on freedom of navigation, and I believe it's worth fighting for. Of course, I don't want to see any, especially Indian commercial ships, being hurt in this operation at the fault of the Islamic regime. So this is why I am not advocating for the war to continue. I'm advocating for the Islamic regime to do the right things and behave like a real nation and not pursue nuclear weapons or trying to upset the freedom of navigation of the world. It's already trying to tell the Houthis to close the Bab and Ghani Straits off of Yemen. This is why the true nature of why this war is happening has to be expressed clearly. And I think, yes, the United States could have done a better job of that, but as well as to our allies like India, explaining why the operation is so vital for all of us.
No, but it's not just, India and Iran, but look at the vast dependence that India has in the Middle East. We have about 10 million Indian expats who live and work in various countries in the Middle East, in the UAE, in Bahrain, in Qatar. Their lives have been upended in these last 5 months. India depends, as you very well know, for a bulk of its energy imports, its crude oil imports from these Gulf Arab countries. That's been disrupted in a significant way. Frankly, from India's point of view, nothing good has come out of this war. So how do you make the case as an American to the Indian people that this war was necessary or that it's rewarded in some form or fashion?
Sure. And I think the Gulf states are also, with 85% of their imports, their food, the targeting of their desalination plants are hurting. To say that this was worth it, again, I'd go back to the two primary reasons: non-nuclear proliferation, right? As much as India understands what they have suffered because of Pakistan's nuclear umbrella, we have to understand what has been done to the Islamic regime's nuclear program from the 12-day war in June of 2025 till now, and the ability to set that back and actually use what was necessary to compel them to give that pursuit up, as much as their missile program, right? Again, not directly impacting India, but the pursuit of this missile ballistic shield and attacking all of your neighbors. This instability has to be understood in what the Islamic regime was really wanting to do. It doesn't want to just be left alone and act like a normal nation. I mean, now it wants to coerce India even to pay tolls to use the Strait of Hormuz, which may be acceptable to India, but it's not acceptable to the United States because of the ripple in the Malacca Straits and any strait of the world, and the ripples would be immense.
So I'm coming back to that question. Are we today any closer to saying that Iran is further away from developing a nuclear weapon today than it was before the war began? Is Iran further away from being able to enforce its writ in the Strait of Hormuz and charge a fee or a toll or whatever you want to call it today than it was 6 months ago? On both of those questions, I think we as the collective international community are worse off today than we were 6 months ago.
So that's interesting. I mean, the ability to do both those things, Zakka, it requires capability and the will to do it. To argue that the Islamic regime has the same amounts of capabilities that it did before this war on both those fronts, so from the nuclear, the 13 nuclear scientists, all of its nuclear sites, it's 21,000 centrifuges, it's 4 manufacturing plants to create centrifuges, are all gone. I don't know how any objective analyst could say that the Islamic regime hasn't been set back decades on its nuclear pursuits. Now, on its ability to impact the straits, it's lost its entire Navy. And I think the operation that's happening now over the last 6 days was the operation that should have continued before the operation was halted on removing their means, right? Because the only emboldened will of the Islamic regime is in combination to what it believes its abilities, its means to cause suffering on its neighbors and on the strait. And I think if we argue, okay, what does it have to influence the strait, from its mines to its navies to its mosquito fleet, all of that has been attrited, and to the point where they acknowledge that their actual abilities are going to be threatened. This is the contest of the will. And the United States has done what no nation has ever stood up and done and been able to do, is to stop the Islamic regime from getting both a nuclear umbrella, a missile umbrella, and this coercive grip on the Strait of Hormuz.
Let me ask you about the differences between the two countries that started this war, which is America and Israel. And we've seen President Trump has made no bones about the fact that, he's had some heated conversations with Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. Just recently, the vice president said in a podcast that there are certain people within the Israeli government who are trying to manipulate and trying to change American public opinion to keep this war going on indefinitely. Clearly, a large number of Americans, particularly in the MAGA base, this, hate forever wars, given what America had to endure in Afghanistan or in Iraq. Nobody in America at this point of time, certainly in Trump's base, wants a forever war. Trump does not want a forever war. So how do you make the case again, or how does Trump make the case to the American people that this will get over quickly and the objectives will be achieved, and ultimately this is a president who's going to face elections in less than 6 months, and he's got high gas prices to worry about, he's got plummeting ratings to worry about. How does he make that case?
Sure. I mean, I think making the case of the 4 objectives that were set on February 28th and have been repeated was a necessary step of making that case to the American population. The true threat of the Islamic regime, not just to the region, but to the world. It's shown that it has missiles that can range all European capitals. The ability to make that argument, this idea of the forever war, right? This goes back to that 38 days and like, this is going on forever. As a student of war, as a war scholar, and the president actually made that in one speech of giving the actual ranges of certain wars. But to be clear, this isn't a forever war where the goal is unlimited, as in a regime change, occupation, or nation building. I was a part of those operations. I don't want to see the United States doing that. But I also understand the capabilities of achieving successes in limited wars. This is about changing the behavior of the Islamic regime. It's not about changing the theocracy, changing all the things. It's about changing as much as India, I think, should understand in seeing what their neighbor, a nuclear-armed state that backs terrorism and launches cross-border terrorism, should understand about changing the behavior at times. You try diplomacy. That was tried for decades, whether it's the JCPOA and giving them money or just straight diplomacy. And it reached a tipping point. And I think the Americans understand that. But the ideal that 38 days is a quagmire, turns into a forever war, or that we're going to be taking over Tehran and instituting a full democracy, I think is simple thinking. Okay. The argument needs to be made why it's necessary, yes.
One final word. Again, I think 38 days is a bit of a misnomer because we're back again, many would say, to square one. So it's 38 plus at least the last 7, and God knows how many more. But if you were to look ahead, and I had Ambassador Khalilzad earlier on in the program this week, and he said this could play out either of 3 ways. He said either this war could escalate because neither side is willing to give in or give up. So this could escalate pretty quickly in the next few days and weeks. Or he said we could have these sporadic clashes going on, and that could continue for months. That was his second option. And he said the third and least plausible option, according to him, was that both sides come back to the negotiating table and find a diplomatic solution. He reckons this will continue for months, but on a sporadic basis. If you were to look at it for the next 6 months, how do you see this war play out?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I think those 3 scenarios are plausible. I think that actually this does, like other wars, end at a negotiation table, but with the actual power of the United States and the leverage being more so than what the Islamic regime believes it is. What do I think? I think it actually will escalate. And this is the aspect of, as a strategist, the worst thing you can ever do on war is tell your enemy what you're not willing to do. And like you said, there are war is politics by other means. Many U.S. considerations, from gas prices, the market, the elections that don't impact President Trump, but of course the Republican Party and staying in power in both parts of the houses. I believe it will escalate because anybody, and rightfully so, could criticize the operation. Wasn't enough to compel the Islamic regime to do what the United States is seeking, not regime change, but giving up nuclear weapons and giving up coercing the Strait of Hormuz. Is that enough power wasn't put forward to do that? So I think this will escalate, as we saw the pause to try diplomacy fail, but I do believe it will come back to diplomacy eventually. I mean, this is the contest of wills. The Islamic regime hasn't been compelled enough.
Okay, John Spencer, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope that we get a chance to speak with you hopefully sooner than later, and hopefully sooner than later this war will end. So thank you very much for joining us here on Times Now.